Hi everybody and welcome to the English Labs video, The Texts in 10, where we aim to equip you with a range of different ideas about the comparative pairs and to open up some thinking around the ways in which you can be really insightful when you're writing your comparative essays. My name is Ben Taylor and today we're going to be looking at the pairing of the Penelopiad and Photograph 51. And we're going to be breaking it down to look at three key things that we think are going to really help you open up your understanding of these two texts and ways that you can start to find things beyond just the similarities in order to really get the most out of your analysis and your comparison. And so the first idea that we're going to look at is obviously the most prevalent idea that exists between these two texts. And the first thing that you think when you close the second one that you've read, when you read about it and you think, these texts are clearly about misogyny and sexism. Now, of course, this is a theme that is quite prevalent throughout both. It is the focus of both of these texts. And the reason we're starting with this idea is because we want to make sure that people are going beyond just identifying that these texts share a very strong thematic link. We need to be able to go beyond identification of sexism and misogyny as the prevalent themes in both of these texts and actually start to pick apart what they are saying about misogyny and sexism and how this might differ in certain ways so that we can get to some really great insightful analysis and comparison. And the way in which we're going to do that is that we're going to have a think about the manner in which people react, and particularly the way in which Penelope and Rosalind react to the sexism and the misogyny that they experience. Because the different reactions that are brought out from these characters are going to be able to show us the different things that we can say and the different things that the authors have been able to say about the nature of misogyny and sexism. So if we start to think about that, we can think about the manner in which certain characters are dismissed, that they're unacknowledged, in the manner in which they are dealt with in this brutally violent way. There is a range of ways that misogyny and sexism comes across in these texts and the impacts that it has on the female characters. Of course, when we look at this in further depths, we can also start to think about their interactions with the male characters. And when we think about this, we can open ourselves up to thinking about scenes such as Penelope and the manner in which she must humour Odysseus when he comes back. When he returns, and she can obviously see that it's him in a disguise. However, we have that fantastic quote that it would be imprudent to step between a man and the reflection of his own cleverness. This idea that to live in these worlds and for them to exist in these worlds that they are in, that they must not only consider what they want, but they consider how they're going to work around men and around the expectations that are there. And so we can see it in those types of ways. We can also see it in the manner in which Rosalind, is described as this right old hag, and that she has to fight to be seen as an equal and as a colleague, and just the very, even somewhat more subtle ways in which this sexism comes across by the fact that they call her Rosie or Miss Franklin rather than Dr. Franklin, and seeing her as the colleague that she truly is. And so when we start to really break it down to look at the range of reactions from the different female characters in these texts, as well as the different ways in which this misogyny and sexism is shown, we can start to tease out some of the differences and open ourselves up to some really fantastic analysis and comparison. The second thing that we really want to look at today is taking a step back and thinking about the reframing of a narrative and the manner in which Atwood and Ziegler have done this. Of course, we always want to be able to discuss the themes and the events and the quotes and the things that exist within this play and within this novel, but we also need to be able to take a step back and consider the authorial intent. Be able to take a step back and think, well, why have these stories been rewritten? Why is it that Atwood has taken this very well-known story from the Odyssey and put the feminist perspective into it? Why is it that she gives voice to these characters that were voiceless before? And the same thing exists for Ziegler in terms of taking a moment in history and reframing it in a way that puts forward the experiences of Rosalind Franklin in a way that others may not have considered in the past. And of course, just like with the ideas of sexism and misogyny, we need to be able to go beyond the fact that we can point out that both texts do this, but rather we need to get to what they're saying about the power of being able to tell your own story. Atwood is obviously able to do this through the maids, those people who were previously voiceless and are now given a voice, in a way that when we read it, we start to empathise, we start to understand, we start to see this otherwise unheard of view that is now being given a voice, and we see the power of that and how that comes through. Of course, this is similar in the way to Rosalind, and we see that she could not control her narrative, so therefore she was powerless to this. And so whilst it might be a similar idea, the manner in which this is achieved through either text is where we can start to draw out some differences and some rich comparison. By Atwood giving voice to certain characters that were not voiced before, they are given the power of being able to tell their story, despite what might happen to them in that story. And rather, in Photograph 51, whilst we learn a similar lesson and we see similar values coming across, it is through the way in which Rosalind Franklin is dismissed and the manner in which she has no control over her story and is at the mercy of all of these other male scientists that we learn a very similar lesson. But the manner in which it's come about is quite different, and that Rosalind has ended up being viewed as this difficult woman. So again, going further with the similar ideas and looking at the different ways in which they come about. And so our third thing that we think will be really valuable for you when you're going through these texts in class and at home is to take a look at the source of power. So again, we're not just looking at the idea that power exists in each of these texts, and some characters have it and some characters do not, but rather looking at the source of it. Where does it really come from? So this can be a great thing for you to do, to ask yourself how we could distinguish characters between who has power and who is without it, and then also asking yourself, why do they feel that they have this power? And again, it comes back to the manner in which this comes across. And in the Penelopiad, we have these examples of brutality and of violence and of physical strength and intimidation. If you think about the suitors and the manner in which they behave around Penelope and her son, and the arrogance and the manner in which they know that they aren't threatened by anything around there, we can see that that attitude can come from that physical strength and that physical intimidation as a way of holding that over another person. Where we can see that slightly differently in Photograph 51 is that the scientists, the male scientists, Watson, Crick, etc., they don't overtly put themselves over any female characters in a physical way, but there are a litany of examples where they feel that they have this dominance over women in the manner in which they talk about them and in the manner in which they can dismiss them so easily, or just merely not acknowledge them or see them as difficult to work with, or whatever it might be. And so therefore, again, we have this source of power and this inherent feeling of power that certain characters have. But where we can start to analyze it in further depth is to think about where the source of that power is. And that even though one of those sources of power may be much more physical and overt and concrete, the other can be more abstract, but it manifests itself in ways where we see sexism and misogyny coming through in the actions of Rosalind's colleagues and the way in which they treat her. And so that's just 3 ideas that we thought would really help you as you're going through these 2 texts and as you get started in trying to find as many links as you can and to find as many ways that you can analyze them in depth and in detail. Of course, this video could go for 5 times as long and we could talk for hours about all of the things that exist between these texts, but we've just kept it for 3 today. Can you please make sure that you ask any questions in the comments? One of our main aims with our project here at the English Lab is to not only help you through videos such as this and talking to you through the lens, but also to interact with you guys in the comments. If there's any questions that you might have, perhaps you might have some comments or feedback or things that you think we should have considered when we were including things in our video. Perhaps you might challenge something that I said today and you might see it differently. I'd love to hear from you with that as well, of course. So we have a range of interpretations and opinions down there in the comments. If you've got something out of the video and if you've enjoyed it, you could hit like. That would really help with supporting us. We're here to help you out with other aspects of the VCE English study design as well. So we'll have subsequent videos, not just on the comparative pairs and how to put together comparative paragraphs and how to respond effectively to questions, but also videos on the Section A texts, as well as some language analysis material and some exam preparation videos as well. So they'll all be coming out very soon, and the manner in which you can keep on top of all of those is to just subscribe to our channel. We'd appreciate any like, comment or subscribe that we could get, so we can get our word out there and be helping as many Year 12 students as we can. So if you can, subscribe and ask as many questions as you'd like, and until next time, all the best with your studies.